So in the last lesson I discussed stop motion animation, and I showed how animations are illusions of movement created by images that change slightly between frames when they're played quickly. And in this lesson I want to talk about tweening, which is a way of automating the process of creating frames. And in fact something called in-betweening predates computers because this was used in the film industry when they were creating animated movies by hand using paint and drawing tools like pencils, coloured pencils, that kind of thing, not when it wasn't on computers. In-betweening was a popular skill, and senior artists would create keyframes for the animations, and the keyframes were the frames of the movie where an important graphical change had taken place. And these wouldn't necessarily be frames that were directly after each other. They would leave the frames in between for junior artists to use those keyframes that the senior artists had created as guides, and then the junior artist would create additional frames in between them, and that was known as in-betweening. So Flash still uses the term keyframe, and almost in-betweening it's using the word tweening instead, which is an automated process. So let's have a look at this tweening. I've got here a dark circle, which I'm going to say is a keyframe, and a light circle, which I'm going to say is another keyframe. If you were in the movie industry several years ago, you would have senior artists that create these keyframes, and then the junior artists would fill in drawings based on the two keyframes, using those as guides. What Flash allows you to do is to automate the process, so you can create two keyframes and then tell Adobe Flash to create a tween, and then it will create the in-between frames automatically, saving a lot of time drawing. And in fact there are two main types of tweening in Flash. One is called shape tweening and one is called motion tweening. And shape tweening is mostly used for colour and shape changes, whereas motion tweening is used for movement changes like rotations and translations. And there's a difference between how the two are set up. In motion tweening the tween is added first, and in shape tweening the keyframes are added first, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. I also want to give you a project at the end of this lesson, but I'll discuss that later on. So let's have a look at shape tweening first of all. So I'll set up a shape tween in the same way as you've seen on that slide. A dark circle. Dark blue is already selected, so I'm just going to, I'll just make the stroke colour invisible, holding down Shift to create a perfect circle. So I've created a dark blue there. Remember I just said that we need to put in keyframes first for a shape tween, which is what I'm making here. So I'm going to insert my keyframe at frame 40 in this case. So I right mouse click and insert keyframe, which has copied the contents of frame 1 into frame 40. So I'm going to change the colour of that to a lighter blue, and I'll just show you what it looks like at the moment. All of those frames are with a dark blue, and then it's just frame 40 with a light blue. But if you right mouse click anywhere between frame 1 and frame 40 and then say create a shape tween, then that will put in all the intermediate frames in between those two colours. So if I click on frame 1 and press enter, now what happens is there's a colour change. If I go Control Test to do a test compile, you can see the same thing on that test Flash movie. Now I said that shape tweens can be used for colour and shape changes, so I'm just going to apply a deformity using the selection tool. Just wanting to get the cursor looking like a curve on this. There we go. So I just want to make it a different shape. And now if I do a control test, it's changing the shape and the colour at the same time. And you sometimes find that a shape tween might not go as you planned. Adobe Flash might fill in frames in a way that you don't want it to. And in that case you might have to put additional keyframes in to make sure it works properly. Or you could use something called a shape hint, which is under Modify, Shape, and then you can go Add Shape Hint. And what that does is it adds, usually it adds only just one at a time, but in this case it's added 3, which is fine. I'm just going to put one on each edge like a triangle. A, B and C, you can add more using Modify, Shape, Add Shape Hint. I'm going to go to frame 40 and I'm going to align those to where I want the points to correspond on that shape tween. So if I go control test, let's see how that's worked out. It looks pretty much the same, which is fine because there wasn't really a problem with that particular shape tween. One more thing I want to show you. At the moment, frame 1 to frame 2 runs at the same speed as frame 39 to frame 40. So it's a kind of smooth animation that goes all at the same speed. If I now change the ease, if I go into the click anywhere between frame 1 and frame 40, put ease at 100%, or at 100 anyway, then go control test. You can see it's going fast at the start and slow at the end. And I can do the opposite by clicking there and putting an ease in instead. Slow at the start and then fast at the end. Right, so I think I've shown you enough on shape tweening. So let's talk a bit about motion tweening. And I'm going to motion tween this dot at the top. Although first I'm going to make sure my background will show during the whole tween, because if I make a tween at the moment, if I go to frame 40 for example and insert a frame, you'll see that my background is restricted to frame 1. So I'm just going to press Ctrl Z and I want to see more frames here, so I could use the frame zoom if I want to, or let's put that back roughly, or I can click and drag further along to see some more frames, and I'm going to go to frame 120, right mouse click and insert a frame, and that will just make sure my background remains displayed throughout the animation. So I'm also going to lock that there. That means I can't do anything to the background while I'm adjusting this animation. So I just want to show you first of all how a motion tween works, and as I said, there's a difference in how you set this up. Instead of inserting a keyframe to start with, you insert frames instead. So don't insert a keyframe with a motion tween, insert frames, and then then go right mouse click anywhere on that area and choose create motion tween. At the moment there's no motion tween, no motion anyway, there's a tween there, but to add the motion, go to the last frame. If you want you could use a different frame, but I'm going to go to the last frame in that. I'm just going to move the ball and it creates a sort of keyframe. It's a keyframe specific to a motion tween, and you can tell it's there because a black dot has appeared. And also this motion path has appeared. So if I go to frame 1 and press enter, you'll see it moves along that motion path. And I can also control test. Let's do a test compile, and you can see it moving there. I can use a deformity like I can with a shape using the selection tool on the motion path. So now it will move in a curve. But I actually want it to move through the maze, which is a much more complicated motion. So I've selected the motion path. I'm just going to hit delete on my keyboard. And I'm going to lock this layer for the moment. And I'm going to create a new temporary layer. I'm not going to call it anything because I'm going to delete it in a moment. And I'm going to use the pencil tool to draw a path through the maze. So I'll just do that. I'll start here. And I'm going to turn this path that I'm drawing into the motion path for the wall. So I've got a path that I've drawn, that's just in a pencil, so at the moment it's not a motion path. So I'm going to cut it, and then I'm just going to unlock the ball there. I'm going to go into the ball there, and I'm going to go edit, paste in place. And instead of pasting as a pencil, it's pasted as a motion layer. And I want the motion to be more than 50 frames. I'm going to go to the end of that motion tween. You can see an expanding icon, or rather expanding cursor has appeared. I'm just going to click and then drag that all the way to 120 where I had the background. So there's 120 frames now in this animation, and it's following the motion path that I just drew and copied, or rather cut and paste. I'm just going to delete the layer where I did that. So now if I go control test, the ball follows the path out of the maze. And as with the shape tween, I can put an ease in and an ease out. So I'll just show you an example. If I control test with ease set at 100, it's fast at the start, and then it slows down at the end. So, just to summarise what I've done, I've shown you a shape tween, which requires 2 keyframes, and a modified shape in the second keyframe will give you the different keyframe to aim for. And then between the 2 keyframes, you right mouse click and create a shape tween. So that's all you need to do for creating a shape tween. For a motion tween, you have your symbol to start off with, and then instead of creating keyframes, you create just frames, ordinary frames, and then apply a motion tween to those frames using right mouse click and create motion tween. And then what I did was I went to the last frame of that motion tween and I moved the ball, and that created the motion tween effect. And then I created a motion path using a pencil tool, and then just pasting the path that I drew into where the motion path is that I'd created. So I created a motion path. It was empty at the time because I deleted the previous motion path, and then I pasted in the penciled version, and that's how I made this maze. So I want to talk about a project that I'm going to give you briefly. I'll show you how this is done later on, but I'll just show you it first. So it's a wheel that's been created, or animated rather, using a motion tween. So I want you to think about how that would be done using the information I gave in the last lesson and also in this lesson. So I'm just going to cross it off and give you some more information about that. So create a motion tween to roll a wheel 115 pixels wide across the screen with realistic movement, and the wheel should turn by 10 degrees in each frame. And you'll find a file with a wheel in associated with this lesson. And next lesson I want to talk about something called masking.